Welcome back to One Fair Review, everybody. I'm your host, Grant Wascavage, here at your service. Today we're going to do a quick review on the Ultraman anime on Netflix, presented by the studios of Production IG, and Sola Digital Arts. Both studios have a rich selection of shows to back them up, some great, some not so much. The point is, these are established studios, at least Production ID is. And this is a very important aspect when going into this review, so I want you guys to remember Production IG is the one that worked on this show. So without further ado, let's talk about the story. Let's go into the story and then move on to my feelings towards Ultraman. So the story goes as follows. Shinjiro Hayata, son of Shin Hayata, who was the first Ultraman, by the way, has a natural special power. One day, Shinjiro was attacked by an unknown enemy. Ultraman saved the day and unmasked himself to show Shinjiro that it was his father, Shin. Wearing an Ultraman suit provided by Mr. Ide, formerly a member of the SSSP, Science Special Search Party, Shinjiro throws down the gauntlet and helps his father, then the real battle commences. In this show, we will follow Shinjiro and his adventures to struggling to become a hero or struggling to become Ultraman while he faces the plethora of enemies, and that's pretty much the whole show. Now, as for the cast, it has a huge cast. There's a lot of people in this show, and since some people have complained that I don't mention every single character literally everybody in a series, I'm just going to put a list of them on screen and you guys can check them out. This is the list of all the characters of the show. I'm not voice actors. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's a list of all of them. There's a lot of people, like I said. And in some ways, not all of them are important, but in another way, I guess they are important to the overall story in some way. Now, getting back to the show, now that we got all the little details out of the way. Originally, the studio by the name of Trigger, you guys remember them, approached the producers and asked them if they could make an Ultraman series. However, the producers did say that, oh, no, we already have an Ultraman anime series on its way, and it's going to be exclusive on Netflix, and Netflix is producing it, or is helping publish it, and they gave Trigger the rights to Gridman, which that turned into SSSS Gridman, which was a show from long time ago. You guys probably remember. I did a review on it on this channel. Great show. I loved it. And in all honesty, I think it would have been better if they just said, hey, you could take Ultraman, and they would have probably done an amazing job, because this show is, oh boy, it's not too good. It's not too good, let me tell you. Now, I just want to get this out of the way. First and foremost, I usually don't start with the animation in a review, but I'm going to start here because it is important, critical to the enjoyment of the show. The animation style is CGI 3D animation, which in anime that is usually known as the devil's bane, and a horrible thing. I've never liked 3D CGI animation. The only time I've seen it done well is when they use it sparingly in anime to enhance a scene, or in American animation as well. But it's usually used very poorly. Ufotable was probably the master of it at this point, mainly because they blend it together. But usually when a series goes all CGI, I've never liked it. I've never liked it because there's no defined style to it, and it doesn't look artistic, and more often than not, it just looks bland. The only exception to that being High Score Girl, which was another Netflix exclusive show, and I will get to that eventually. Now, I did a review on Godzilla a while back, and I said that the animation was bad. I did not like it. However, I have to apologize to the people who worked on Godzilla, because that show, or that series, looked a lot better than Ultraman. My god, Ultraman has some bad 3D CGI animation. It's horrendous at times, and I mean that in the worst way possible. This animation at times can look as bad as PS2 level graphics. There are games nowadays, like anime games nowadays, that look better than this show, and that's not a good thing. This show has numerous problems when it comes to animation. For one, it's very bland, very uninteresting. Nothing's going on in the background. Everything looks dull and gray and just uninteresting. The animation itself is very choppy, very choppy. There's a lot of frames that get cut, and it just looks awkward, and it slows down repeatedly, especially during action scenes, certain action scenes. There are some action scenes where they do a great job of refining it and making it look good, but then there's the absolute just rigid edges and just like sharp edges of the characters. It does not look smooth, and it looks very, very awkward, and it really takes me out of the show. Another thing that takes me out of the show is the blur effect that is put on. There are often times where in a background it will be blurry, like as if to mask a render issue. This is something that happens in video games nowadays, but it also happened very frequently back then, where in order to cover up the render issue with the game, they put a blur effect, and that's what it looks like in this show. A lot of scenes look like this, so this is a very common occurrence, and it was distracting as all hell. And I want to stress this out enough. I don't like the animation in this show. Maybe some of you are okay with 3D CGI animation, but even if you are, this show does not do a good job at it. The CGI is very bland. The style of the show is very bland, very dull, lack of color, lack of any real substance. And to give you an example of something that will maybe help you guys understand, there's a moment in the show where they're fighting in a stadium, I believe it's a soccer stadium or football stadium, depending on where you come from. And there's like these two men in giant armored costumes, let's just say that, with abilities, and they're running all around. Explosions are going off all over the grass. Now, you would expect that grass to be gone, but at no point does the grass ever change in the scene. In fact, a lot of the time, the scenery around the fight scenes will never change, and they'll just kind of mask it and hide it in the corner, like, oh, cover it up with a car or a piece of a wall. And I really hate that. I don't see any destruction. Compare this to a lot of other fights. Compare this to the All for One versus One for All. You know, that fight scene, I should say All Might, but whatever. That fight scene, they are fighting in a small area, but like there's destruction everywhere. And that's what I want to see in this type of show. I want to see the destruction, but they don't really go over the top most of the time. It's very bare minimums. And that's just a little complaint in the numerous complaints I have towards this animation. The animation is just the weakest part of the show. It's horrendous at times. And this is one of the reasons why it really dragged down the show for me. I could not get into the show because of the animation style. It just didn't look good. The simple as that, the animation doesn't look good. It's choppy. It's very, very dull looking. There's a lack of color. And I just couldn't get into it overall. Something like High Score Girl has a definitive style to it to where I could get into it, but this one just doesn't have anything. But the shortcomings of this show isn't just in the animation department, it is also in the story department. The story is lacking. This is a show that takes itself a lot more seriously than the original Ultraman series, of course. It wants you to take it more seriously. And it does follow the same character from the show, Shin Hayata, which, I mean, I could figure out if it's the same actor who does his voice. I don't care enough to do that. I will, of course, I have the cast on the screen, so I'll let you guys know if it is or not. But for the most part, he doesn't really play a part in the show. The father to Shinjiro, which is the main character. You would think that the whole handing of the torch and he would be a big part. No, he's just kind of in the first few episodes, and then he makes brief appearances later on, and then that's pretty much it. As far as all the characters go, none of them are particularly interesting or unique. They're all just kind of meh characters. Shinjiro is a bad protagonist, a really bad one, a generic, I want to do hero work, although he does have a little bit more than, say, well, I'm not going to mention who, but he does have a little bit more in that, okay, he kind of wants the fame and attention, but that's really not enough to make a character interesting. And for the most part, you just kind of get frustrated that there's really nothing there. Personally, I don't know his personality. I don't know any of the characters' personality. If you ask me to describe who they are as a person, I wouldn't be able to tell you. And that's a big problem. This was five episodes into the show. I didn't even know the characters' names. I only knew about Shinjiro and his father. But the other ones, I was like, oh, I don't remember their names. They're generic guy in the background. And that's not a good sign. From the first episode of SSSS Gridman, I knew all of the characters, understood their personalities, and just knew who they were as a person in general. And I could describe them if if somebody was to ask me. And when you can't describe your character, you know that that's a bad sign. And there's really no arc between any of them except for Shinjiro. He has a little bit of an arc. His arc is pretty much learning to become Ultraman, and that's pretty much it. And I don't know. I don't find that to be interesting. I didn't find the story to be interesting. The whole revival of the SSSP, division, I did not find that interesting, and the characters were just kind of dull and just there. Now, the story really doesn't have much to it. I really couldn't tell you a lot more of the story. It just kind of goes on, and the story focuses around Shinjiro and trying to become Ultraman and then fighting different enemies. Then it has, a little bit of a twist at the end, but I'm not going to spoil what the twist is, but it's not interesting, and it really doesn't give a great payoff, especially when I waited for the story to kick in for many episodes, and I usually go by a rule of 3 to 4. If the story does not grab me by 3 or 4 episodes, then the show is almost a failure at that point, because this is a show that only has 13 episodes, and it's just a shame. I've been watching other shows in this spring anime time, and there are a lot of great ones. Ufotable came out with a new one, Demon Slayer. I'm loving that show, and there's only 2 episodes, and already I know all the characters, and I love all the characters. Well, the characters that have been introduced. But here, I finished the show, and for the most part, I couldn't tell you all the characters. And then, of course, there's the idol girl in this show by the name of Rena. I want to mention her really quick because I could not figure out her character for the longest time, because at first I thought, okay, she's an idol, generic idol girl, literally the most generic idol girl you'll ever see. And she's a big fan of Ultraman, but then later on she kind of says, I'm not a fan of Ultraman. He did this that led to my mother's death. I want to tell Ultraman that you did this, or people get hurt when you fight. And then later on, she is a fan of Ultraman. I don't know, why? I mean, what did they think they were being clever with her? I don't know. Let's move on, get out of the story. The music, soundtrack, decent. That's the best praise I could give to the show. The soundtrack was decent. The main hero theme is actually very memorable. I have it in my head right now. I can hum it if I want, and I'll give it that. It's decent, it's very memorable, and it would have given me goosebumps if I cared about the characters, or if the writing was clever, if the fight scenes were really cool. For the most part, the fight scenes are okay at best, but that's it. The music is okay. There's not even an intro, really, and the outro is pretty generic, but the main theme, the hero theme, it is kind of catchy, so I'll give it that. It has a decent soundtrack. So how to properly sum up my feelings on Ultraman, the anime? I'll summarize it this way. I was excited because I saw a poster on the internet. It was like, Netflix anime has just released Ultraman, the anime. And I was like, whoa, this looks amazing. And I saw just a poster. I didn't see a trailer. And I was like, and then it just says Ultraman. See it on Netflix today. And I was like, whoa, this is going to be great. So I went to Netflix and I started watching it, and I was instantly disappointed. And as I wanted to love it even more as I went along, I was still getting more and more disappointed because the story never went anywhere. The story never kicked in. The characters never were likable, and they were just kind of generic most of the time, even to the point where they have that generic American, that one jock who's blonde and blue eyes, and they call him Jack. Yeah, that's a great name for a character, just Jack. Whatever. But yeah, so that's kind of my feelings, how they were during the show. Just kind of bored. I was bored, it was dull, and there really wasn't much to it. This is not the worst anime I've seen in my life, but it is one of the most disappointing animes I've seen as of late. It was really disappointing. I really wanted to love this show. I did try, many times getting into it, and I did finish it, and now I'm here reviewing it, and I have to say, nothing about it stood out to me. None of the characters, the story, the animation style. I really believed if they had given this to Trigger, it would have been a much better show, but that's all in the past. Unfortunately, you can't do that. I honestly just recommend you guys to go watch SSSS Gridman, because that's a great show with a great cast of characters and a lot of great memorable moments, and it actually does 3D CGI animation mixed with 2D animation very well. So I do recommend you watch that show instead of this, because this is just miserable at points. It's miserable because you want it to be good. And it doesn't even really feel like Ultraman most of the time. It feels like Iron Man. And it feels like they're trying to take it a little bit too serious, which is honestly a detriment to the show. But whatever. My final verdict for Ultraman, the Netflix anime series, is a 5 out of 10. It's mediocre. It's honestly mediocre. I can't say it's bad. I did finish it. The animation is bad. I will say that. The animation's bad. The story is dull. The characters are dull. But there are some fight scenes that I did like, and there are some scenes that I thought were kind of clever. Well, not so much clever, but cool. There were some cool scenes. And it had a decent soundtrack. So I give it a 5 out of 10. Very mediocre show. I don't really recommend it, to be honest, even though it is free on Netflix. I don't recommend it. I do recommend you guys to watch SSSS Gridman by Trigger. It's a much better show, and I honestly believe if they just did Ultraman, they would have done an amazing job. This Iron Man type show is just, it's really not worth the time, and I'm really disappointed. Like, my day was ruined by this show, and my disappointment was truly immeasurable. It was pretty bad. Alright, thank you guys for joining me. We have started off officially the spring anime season. I'm watching a few shows right now. I might talk about them in the future once I've watched a little bit more of them. But as for right now, this is the first review, and mainly because it was the first one to just be finished like that. That was me snapping into the mic. Can you guys hear that? Yeah, I'm not gonna do that ever again. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Have you guys watched Ultraman? If you have, tell me what you thought. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you not care for it? Are you never gonna watch it? Do you hate me for reviewing it? Let me know down in the comments below. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. I always appreciate it. Stay tuned for more reviews. We're gonna be doing a few more reviews coming up soon. And I'm Grant for One Fair Review. As always, have a nice day, and I'll see you next time.